Mike McCool here. I'm in the Royal Examiner studio, and with me today is Peter Houlahan. He is the author of a really cool book, Norco 80.
Norco 80.
And he's here for a special fundraiser at Samuel's Public Library, but I'm going to let Peter tell you about his book and what he's going to...
Sure.
A prelude of what you're going to say about tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll tell you about the book and then how this
event goes. Yeah, how it all came about. I mean, it's kind of, well, of course, libraries put on things, but this is a great fundraiser. The library needs to raise some money, and you're generous enough to come all this way.
No, happy to do it. I really am. You know, these days, libraries, independent booksellers, they're really kind of the backbone of building communities.
Exactly.
So, reading communities, and so they're important. We like to support them all the time.
Well, we support local authors. We'll support authors that aren't quite as local as you are, but we try to do that. So and I'm surprised they do come here. We have the Royal Oak Bookshop. You know, it's a small little. Have you ever been there?
I saw it coming into town.
Seen into town. So you know, we have a little niches like that. It's great for bookshops and things. So tell us about the book. Yeah,
the book is Norco 80: The True Story of the Most Spectacular Bank Robbery in American History, and it's. On May 9th, 1980, 5 young men with no criminal records whatsoever went in and attempted a takeover robbery of the Security Pacific Bank in Norco, California. It's about 40 miles outside of Riverside, or it's in Riverside County, about 40 miles east of Los Angeles, and it rapidly turned into one of the most violent events in American law enforcement history. When it was over, there was 3 dead, 15 wounded, including 8 sheriff's deputies that were wounded. The others were civilians. There were 32 police vehicles either disabled or destroyed, including a police helicopter that was shot down over the I-15 freeway.
It sounds like a movie.
Yeah, well, it has a very... The event itself is very cinematic. There is no doubt about it. I really take time to look at the quote characters. These are real people. Right. It's a tragic event. Deputy got killed in it, and but I really take a real close look at the characters, police officers, what happened to them afterwards. There was a lot of post-traumatic stress and things that were not being treated. Right. And remember, it's 1980, so this is a different era for sure in a lot of different ways. These guys were heavily armed.
That's the thing now. The police have always complained over the years that the criminals have bigger and better guns than the law enforcement.
Well, this really was certainly a gateway event to what's now known as the militarization of American police forces. And the reason is that these 5 young men, and I'll tell you their motivations, which is very strange, but they were heavily armed. They were armed with semi-automatic, high-powered rifles, high-capacity magazines, thousands of rounds of ammunition. Wow. So these are essentially the civilian version of military-grade weapons, semi-automatic, not automatic, all bought legally. They had also made homemade fragmentation grenades in their garage using the Anarchist Cookbook. People our age can remember the Anarchist Cookbook. Sure. But they made these...
People maybe your age.
There's these fragmentation grenades were like beer cans with shrapnel around them, a detonation device. They could put them on dowels and launch them out of a shotgun. They go about 100 yards, or they could just be thrown, which they did on the freeway. They all had sidearms on them, and knives and everything else you can imagine. And they didn't have any criminal records, but they sure geared up for this thing.
They were prepared. They had a plan. I wonder how long did it take to plan it?
Let me finish one.
Well, we don't want to give away all the secrets. So
no, you can't.
Come to the talk.
There is so much involved in this story that when I give my presentation tomorrow, I don't hide things really too much because there's so much that went on. But to answer your question, the deputies involved were guarding the Wild West the same way they have for 100 years at that time, a 6-shooter and a Winchester shotgun. And they were so vastly outgunned that it was within a year after that the law enforcement agencies involved, Riverside County Sheriffs, San Bernardino County Sheriffs especially, Highway Patrol, California Highway Patrol were also heavily involved. Those 2 sheriff's departments immediately bought over 150 semi-automatic, high-powered rifles to put in their patrol units and things like that. So it was a bit of a gateway event, and they certainly were outgunned. And you know, it's one of those things where that was a very justifiable step that they had to make. They were starting to see things on the streets like that a lot, especially with drug dealers. But
well, how did you come about to write this book? I mean,
well, I'm
it
from
is historic.
there.
I feel it was happening in your backyard.
Yeah, I'm about 15 miles away. I'm from Whittier, California,
Okay.
so I'm from Los Angeles, and it happened. I was about 18 years old at the time. I was absolutely captivated by this event. Like nothing I'd ever seen before or anybody had seen for a very long time, since going back to the gangster era.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these days we're kind of immune to these incredible tragedies, mostly these mass shootings and things like that. This is a different kind of animal. This is a crime gone wrong. They did not leave their house intending to kill anybody, so it's different. And when you talk about within that framework, you'd have to go back to the gangster era before a bank robbery really went that wrong.
Right.
With that many weapons and just openly shooting at anybody and killing civilians and law enforcement officers and things like that. So it always stuck with me. And then when I would tell people the story over the years, they say, "Wait a minute, did that really happen?"
Why don't you write a book? You know?
Yeah. Well, and
a lot of people say that. They go, "Oh yeah, I'll just write that book." And how long did it take?
It was a tremendous amount of research because there was a tremendous amount of people involved. There was a trial that went for 16 months, which a lot of the book is dedicated to that because it was completely out of control. So there was literally tens of thousands of documents to go through, hundreds and hundreds of hours of interviewing police officers involved, the surviving bank robbers in prison. So it took me about 4.5 years. It's not that much, not too long for a piece of nonfiction but a little bit longer just because of the tremendous amount of research. And you know, like I said, the event itself is pretty astonishing. And this was they came out of the bank and they came head to head, just bad luck for all involved, and as it turns out, with a Riverside County Sheriff's deputy right outside that bank. They'd had ski masks on and their weapons and all their military gear, and they were spotted actually going in the bank by a teller from a bank across the street. That's how they were seen. But the scope of this event and the reason why it always stuck with me, it starts with a ferocious firefight in the middle of a busy Southern California intersection at 3:30 on a Friday afternoon,
wow.
in which hundreds of rounds are fired off between 3 deputies and these 5 bank robbers, and one of their getaway driver gets killed. So then they spread out into this intersection and steal a pickup truck and go on a 40-mile running gun battle through the suburban streets of Riverside County. And they are shooting police cars everywhere. And by now you have deputies, city police, California Highway Patrol are bailing off the freeway.
The adrenaline is rushing, isn't it?
Yeah. And then it gets onto a freeway. And then they're hitting police car vehicles from a half-mile away because they're standing in the back of this pickup truck.
Right.
Or one of them sitting out the window of the passenger seat. They're hitting police vehicles for a half-mile away. They're throwing hand grenades out on the freeway.
Now, these guys, I recall something I read, they're not like military-trained
No.
landscapers or something.
Yeah.
What was their background? To turn into high-powered criminals.
Well, the person who put this together and recruited everybody else and put together the plan is a guy named George Wayne Smith, who's 27 years old at the time. And all 5 of them come from Orange County, California. There are a few things that happened in George Wayne's early life that kind of propelled him towards this robbery. One is that he became involved at a very early age in the aggressively evangelical, born-again Christian movement, youth movement that came out of Orange County in the 70s. And it's very end times theologies, Book of Revelation, heavily centered on the rapture. And you know, the catastrophes that would lead up to it,
right.
Breakdown in social order and things like that. George was a true believer in that. Second is he went off to Germany right as he graduated high school. He was trained in tactical battlefield nuclear weapons, put on in the shadows of the Iron Curtain, and those are he's an artilleryman, but what they were trained in was the tactical battlefield nuclear weapons. So when George was on it, looking out for the apocalypse or the coming catastrophes. Like many people in that era, you could look right at this incredible proliferation of battlefield tactical nuclear weapons was such a huge threat. But the bottom line is all these two things converge, and by the end of by 1980, George has fixed a date on when the catastrophes leading into the rapture and the tribulation's second coming, and that is before the end of 1980. And he robs the bank May 1980. That is one of the things that led him to it. He certainly was a true believer. He also had downturns in his personal life. So there were a number of factors. He got a psychological makeup, but he was he was captain of the tennis team. He was editor of the school newspaper. He's on the chess team, the choir.
The last person you thought that would do something like this.
Yeah, he's a bit of a zealot. I mean, he definitely, and he's got a grandiose view of himself. That's why he put together this grandiose bank robbery.
Why did he pick that bank?
It's his own bank.
Oh, familiarity.
Yeah. Well,
no one will know me in here.
Well, it's ski mask. Los Angeles has long been, and for decades before this, was the bank robbery capital of the world. 1 out of every 4 bank robberies in the United States takes place within the jurisdiction of the L.A. field office of the FBI.
Well, that's where the money is. That's where the money is.
Their money and the freeways.
That's right.
So
maybe they think they can get away.
Yeah,
but like I say, you can't outrun the radio.
Well, now, yeah. Well, now it's different, but starting in the 90s and 80s, 70s actually, and heading up into the 90s, the numbers were absolutely off the charts in Los Angeles. I'd say one year there was 2,600 bank robberies, and that's 14 a day, if my math, 14 every banking day. But the cardinal rule is you rob a bank next to a freeway on-ramp. You get on, and if you time your traffic right, you're off. 5 minutes later, you're in a different police jurisdiction, cruising the side streets. George picked a bank that was 7 miles from the closest on-ramp. But they took a hostage, stole a van, set a diversion bomb down the street.
How much money did they supposedly get?
Well, and they ended up...
there's more money in Walmart than most banks,
Well, again, in 1980, people walked out with their week's worth of cash.
That's right. They still had cash.
Yeah, and it was a Friday. But they waited too long. They were waiting for their diversion bomb to go off a mile south. That was going to ignite a gas main, and then every first responder in Norco would end up back there.
There, right.
And it did blow up, but somebody put it out with a fire extinguisher. Well, they were waiting across the bank, and they stole a van and had the guy tied up in the back, and they had all their weapons, and finally they decided to go in at 3:30, and by then that bank had run out of money except for the teller reserves. They'd actually ordered more money from a different branch. So they walked out with only $20,000.
Wow.
Which when you got 5 guys, even back in those days, people could walk out with a few $100,000 if they really timed it right.
Right.
These guys didn't time it right, and they ended up leaving it all in the van when their driver got killed right outside. So...
crime does not pay.
Well, I spent a lot of time speaking with the guy who was the head of the L.A. field office of the FBI, Bill Rader. He's got a great book called Where the Money Is, and about bank robberies and his time there. He said the reason why they get caught is bank robberies. One, most people rob banks have addiction problems. These guys did not. And he says bank robbery becomes an addiction itself, and it's not. You can probably get away with it, especially back in those days, but they always come back and try it again, and eventually something goes wrong, like these guys. They walked out, and there happened to be a Riverside County Sheriff's deputy right in front of that bank. So,
well, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what you're going to talk about. I can tell.
Well, I'm less all over the place when I have
you have PowerPoint.
Yeah, when I have my PowerPoint.
He has his PowerPoint, so sounds like an interesting evening.
Yeah, what I do is I use a multimedia. It's PowerPoint based, but it's maps, it's photos, and I have the original radio traffic from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, which is really dramatic. So I get people involved. It's not me just up there reading a book.
Sure.
It's actually really lively.
Like live TV. I mean, it's going to be.
Yeah.
It sounds exciting.
Well, it really is.
Make it exciting.
Well, that radio traffic is pretty. It's pretty shocking stuff when you hear it. Nothing. This is appropriate for kids and younger folks. It's not graphic, but right. But you hear gunfire going off in the background and people saying, "I've got an artery hit. I'm bleeding badly. I need help." And things like that. But it's I make it very lively, interesting, and it's
And you live there? You still live in California?
I'm in Connecticut now.
Oh, you've escaped from California.
Yeah, well, I certainly will always have a place in my heart for California. It is so crowded now that I I get a little unnerved when I go back there. But
well, we appreciate you coming in and giving us a highlight of what's going to happen
Sure.
tomorrow. It's tomorrow evening. That's Saturday.
Yep.
Can't think of the date.
It's the 9th, I think.
The 9th?
Yeah.
And that's at the Samuel's Public Library at 6 p.m. It's a fundraiser for the library. The tickets are $30. It sounds like a great evening.
Yeah.
And
There's books for sale there, and I'll
course.
sign them if anybody wants. And it's
Think
all
about
going to the Samuel's Library.
It's all going to the library, and the book will make it's true. It's historic.
Oh yeah.
And fiction couldn't be written so well.
Yeah, you wouldn't get away with it.
No one would believe it, would they?
No.
Well,
so, yeah.
Rush on down there, get your ticket, give them the call. We'll put the information in the story in print. You'll be able to do it. It's tomorrow, Saturday, 6 o'clock at the Samuel's Public Library. Hear all about Norco 80. It sounds like a great book. I looked it up. Available on Amazon.
Oh, it's available everywhere. I mean, today, who knows if you go to a local bookstore, but it's there's an audio book. It's been optioned for film, so it's.
I think the film will be interesting.
Yeah,
I can
I
tell
hope so.
already. I'd go see it.
Yeah, well, you never know with Hollywood.
Well, they'll embellish it.
Yeah.
I don't know what else.
If they ever make it at all.
That's true too. I mean, how in the world could they embellish it? I mean, if everything is there.
Yeah, you don't need to embellish.
They would have to cut it. Too much stuff happened. Yeah. It'd be a 3-hour movie. So.
Yeah.
Well, it's great talking to you. I really appreciate it. Thanks
Thank
again
you
for coming in.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.